It doesn't matter.
All right, good evening, everybody. I am calling to order this meeting of the Providence School Board Policy Committee. It is 4:43 p.m. on Thursday, December 5th. Welcome. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Or a motion.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Aye. So approved. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the November 20th, 2024 Policy Committee meeting?
Motion.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Consent agenda is approved. We'll move directly into our work this evening. We are discussing tonight the school board policy process policy. What a mouthful. This policy has already gone before our full school board for a first read at the end of November. And we're here tonight to discuss any potential edits or enhancements beyond what we had already provided during that first read. We got some great feedback during the November 20th school board meeting. So we want to talk through some additions and enhancements we can make tonight. And we're joined tonight by James Scott from the school department, who's going to walk us through some suggested changes, and then we'll talk together, committee members, about other things that we might like to see.
I also have my colleague, Dr. Onye, the equity chief here, so feel free to jump in anytime you like.
Always.
Pursuant to our last meeting, I made some changes. They didn't make the draft tonight, I actually just made these changes in the hour, but I'll put them up on the screen here. So then ask to add to the definition section, and we add definitions for regulation and resolution for the school board. So regulation is pretty straightforward. Regulation with detailed specific rules and directives developed by the superintendent or his designees to implement and enforce board policies. Regulation is designed to provide operational guidance and clarity to the policy framework, ensuring compliance with laws, regulations, standards. That's pretty boilerplate. The second one, the definition of resolution, is a little more school board specific because the resolutions would be an action of the school board. And my first take at this was resolutions are formal expression of the school board's intent or decision on a particular matter. Resolutions are non-binding in nature, can be utilized to draw attention to a specific cause or concern, may be leveraged to make apparent the board's support or non-support of a policy from another legislative body, such as the Providence City Council or the Rhode Island General Assembly. So I feel like that reflects the intent of what the board members were doing. I know board member Escobar had done a couple of resolutions supporting things that are on the agenda of the General Assembly, such as anti-gun laws and things like that. I know members of the school board have used resolutions to call out gaps in policies where, there was no policy, needed a policy, or to maybe support things the district is already doing. So I throw those out there as changes that were asked for. I don't know if there's any feelings on the wording or comments on that part.
I think I might suggest adding a sentence to that larger explanation, saying that, a resolution, I think the way that this suggested language that we're viewing right now reads, that is making a resolution more in reaction to other entities' policies versus a resolution that school board members might propose based on our own policy gaps or, I like this. I just want a little bit more. I think I also would like to see, I think the definition of regulations is clear in how it relates to what a policy is. I don't think that's as clear with resolution.
A resolution's different from a policy. A policy is like, you're compelled to do this or advised to do this, and the resolution, it can be kind of all the above. It can be calling out arts instruction, supporting arts instruction in K-12 schools. It can be supporting something the city council's doing or the general assembly's doing. So it can be kind of all the above. The Google Docs open, if you want to think about it over the next couple of days, you want to put some language in, or I can take another crack at it, probably like proceed with it. So I have a note in there to look at that. I don't know if it's appropriate, if you want to share it out, other board members to see what they think on resolutions.
I mean, I don't know that we need to have, paragraphs and paragraphs about resolutions, but I think it might be helpful here to name that a resolution may be introduced by any school board member, whether a member of policy committee or not.
That's good, that's actually good language, I'll make sure it gets added.
I'm in the document, so, James?
Yep.
Are you putting in the comments? Okay.
I'm putting in a comment, and that way we can clean it up tomorrow.
And then maybe also, so yeah, I would say both adding that language about that any school board member may introduce a resolution. I like that we're clarifying that resolutions are non-binding versus a policy and regulations which are. Yeah, I think that covers it. We can keep working with that language a little bit.
And then, now that you got me thinking, maybe we need to have some language that we have to number resolutions, like 2401, 2402, so maybe starting 25, we'll number them. So we number policies.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yes, we can put that in here.
Stuff, okay.
I'm not as concerned about getting that detailed within the policy itself, other than,
Other changes made include, just trying to see if there's anything else from the other doc. The communication piece, communicate the policy was brought up. So I made a change in this general area. So this is the same, so I wanted to go off the feedback from the last meeting. Superintendent and board will make an effort to inform internal and external stakeholders throughout the policy revision or development process and after ratification by the board. That sentence is somewhat redundant because we talk about that in the development process. But I think it's important, it calls out that we have to communicate throughout. For example, working with the equity committee, working with PAC, DWAC, SAC, all the different student advisory council, district-wide advisory council. We have a number of different advisory boards that support the work and give advice to superintendent. We have a teachers cabinet. So engaging all these different groups, school principals. So that kind of, it's redundant. I think it's redundant in a good way. And then I add venues for engagement can include public meetings, district trainings, and EMS there, meetings with district parents, students, and equity groups when applicable. So I'm going to do a little parallel structure there, but we're good outside that. So I just want to call out, I didn't want to call it specific groups because groups change, but there'll probably always be some sort of an equity focus group. There'll always be parent groups, whether they be PTOs or district-wide parent groups. So just leaving that wiggle room, there has to be, a good faith effort to communicate to all those, both internal and external. I'll make the edits on that, or anyone has any comments.
James, the only word that I noticed, since you have mentioned parents and students, I would just leave it at community meetings. So,
Yeah, at community meetings.
community, you know how you have district trainings, your parent, student, I would just add community meetings.
All right, so then community meetings such as
Or I would
neighborhood meetings,
I would just,
PTOs.
I would just actually just make that one of the examples you have there under, where you say can include public meetings, district trainings, blah, blah, blah. I would just add something like community meetings and community meetings.
Dr. Onier, I was going to suggest something similar. I think to Mr. Scott's point, what those exact groups look like within the district can evolve over time or what they're named. So we want to be careful in our policy language. But I do know that right now we have, for example, a district-wide advisory council. So like, how might we reflect that, maybe not only community meetings, but maybe in that meetings of district, parent, student, community partner and equity groups? Does that sound,
Community partners and equity groups.
just sort of add?
Student, community partners and equity groups. Community partner, what's the, community partner meetings? You know what I mean? Because you're saying these are the places where,
I think I'm thinking more like a community partner advisory group.
community partner advisory groups.
I mean, community partners generally,
Because
like,
community
like-
partner might be too broad, like, we don't wanna commit to reaching out to every single community partner every single time. We wouldn't want folks to feel like that,
Yeah,
that's probably not a surmountable thing to do for every single policy review, so.
yeah, community partner advisory groups makes it less, more.
community partner advisory
Yeah.
groups.
So yeah, maybe take out community meetings and just keep community partner advisory groups in there. So it's a little bit more.
I'll take out community meetings. This is like a messed up sentence now.
That's all right.
Venues for engagement can include public meetings, district trainings, community meetings, and meetings of district parent, student, meetings of district, parent,
Yeah.
student,
Community partner advisory.
community partner, and community partner advisory groups.
But then
Or community partner advisory groups and equity groups when applicable.
exactly. You could
Perfect.
take groups, you could take, your head is in the website.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So community partner advisory and equity groups. I don't think you need groups in there twice. That's just mixed. I think you could take groups out of advisory and just, because you have groups coming in.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
I don't think that way you're looking for, Doctor.
Community partner advisory, take the comma out after advisory. And equity groups.
I think that works.
It's not an F. Scott Fitzgerald level sentence, but it gets the point across.
To be honest with you, community partner advisory, so you're thinking about DWAC and PAC. Actually, the equity advisory committee can also be part of that community partner advisory. You could take equity groups, obviously, you just want the word equity there. You could just keep it as community partner advisory groups and leave out and equity. Because those community partner advisory groups, we're talking about really talking about the internal groups that we have that face out. Right? Does that make sense?
Community partner advisory groups when applicable.
I almost would switch and call it after community meetings, I would say venues for actually, okay, I'm gonna switch the sentence a little bit if I may. I'm gonna say venues for engagement may include
May.
instead of can. Public meetings, district trainings at the S, community meetings, and then I would rephrase the next to say district meetings of parents, students, community partner and community partner advisory groups. I think that way we're clarifying that,
Yeah.
like the community meetings indicates meetings hosted by someone else,
Yes.
whereas that other grouping is internal or meetings convened by the district.
All right. I think we're in a good place on this.
Ms. Newman, I would love to hear your feedback on this specific piece around the communication.
Space between a comma and district.
Sorry, Julie.
That's a I admire anyone who can edit like on the spot, like
On live
well,
stream.
because I can't.
I know. We're live right now and we're editing.
Thank
This
you.
is amazing.
Thank you. No, I think, yeah, as the wordsmithing was happening, I was sort of thinking about, and I'm not sure if we're gonna get to this piece or if this is where this needs to live. I definitely think that most of my questions come around it almost seems like one directional, I think, like when it comes to us communicating change to community. And I don't want it to feel one directional, I want it to feel back and forth, like multi-directional, where it's like there's more of a collaborative effort happening with policy formation that is not just about us. I feel like that's what we see with the district, like sometimes we like, yeah, we did tell you about the change, and the community's like, that's not good enough, like we wanna be involved in the change, not just you telling us about the change. And so I think that's where most of my critique would come from, and again, I don't know if it lives in this section or it's probably the development process piece, I think that we'll get to at some point, just to make clear that there is some room, real room for like collaboration, and that policy can, I don't think should be able to be like elevated by the board of the superintendent, that it could come from anywhere, but that it's our responsibility to look at policy and like pass it, you know, and like work on it together, but that anyone could propose, or any group could propose a policy. It doesn't mean it'll go through, but that anyone should feel empowered to like submit ideas, that it doesn't have to be like through us.
So could we use the word, so if you go back up, because I know what you're saying, and that's one of the things I loved about the equity advisory committees, we worked on the pieces together. It wasn't just me like standing in front giving them,
Yeah.
this is what we're doing, like we literally all worked on it. So maybe when you talk about engagement there, James, will you say through, for venues for engagement, under communication?
Yeah.
Why don't you make it collaborative or two-way engagement? Something that, some word in front of engagement that denotes that it's not like this one-way directional thing, that it's more collaborative.
Venues for collaborative engagement.
I don't know if that works for people.
I like that addition.
Yeah.
That's true, that calls out too, that these are living documents until the second read, and then they can be opened up again at any time, so.
I think I'm worried about, I hear what you're saying, and that the policy needs to come from, like, be organic from the humans that are being served by the district. I guess I'm just wondering, like, how would that happen? Like, are we suggesting that any individual or group could come to policy committee with their own written policy and suggest that? Or that they could be the impetus of a policy? Because I think that the latter already happens. Like, for example, there have been, I'll take the, why can I not put my name on it, ethnic studies resolution that happened that kind of led to like starting to develop policy or processes or protocols or curriculum. Like that had to start somewhere, and that's like responsive and like generative from the community. But I'm not sure from like a process perspective how the policy committee and the board as a whole could handle if like policies were coming without some sort of board member sponsorship prior to getting to policy committee. So I want to elevate that, but think through like what the process could be.
Well, like really, you as school board members are the voice of the community on issues of school policy, so like you hear from people a lot, and you bring those concerns here, city resolutions, and I think with the, with the new structure too, we're gonna have one elected, one appointed from each region. That codifies it even more.
Okay. I know we also have,
There you go.
there's also the section much further in, which might be a place to add more language around that, in the guidelines and implementation strategies. On my hard copy, that starts on page 3. I'm not sure where that is now that we have it more.
What's the section called?
Guidelines and implementation strategies. And that has to do with the regulations around that.
Yeah, so the guidelines and implementation strategies, the top part's kind of boilerplate language you'll see on most of the policies, and then from there, the list, I think either Dr. Onier or Mr. Sutherland might have started creating this bulleted list or the numbered list below during the last meeting. So,
I'm finding this section really confusing, because when I first read this, I was thinking, oh, here in number 3 in particular, how external and community stakeholder feedback will be incorporated into the policy writing and review process.
so I think.
Because to me, that's policy development, but this is actually only talking about the regulations, so I guess I'm confused about what this section is meant to address.
So guys, it should be how we implement it, what the strategies are. So I guess the problem, it's a policy about policies, not specific.
It's very nice.
Where if we're implementing a special ed policy, you do this and this and this with these groups. And now we're talking about, it's like the Seinfeld policy, like it's a policy about policy.
Right.
So it's like, where do we go with it?
Right, I think this is actually particularly important because what we have, or at least what we have found, is that we have quite a bit of policies out there without regulation, right? So this is addressing, one of the strategies is that there will be regulations, and what should happen in those regulations, that's just a draft, you can add more, but what should be included in those regulations is how, particularly that number 3 is actually getting at what you're saying, which is, it should include how you're going to engage, collaboratively engage external stakeholders, right? So I'll give you, I'm gonna go with the example of the Equity Advisory Council, right? So we talked, I'll use the racial ethnicity policy, right? So we opened it up, we had several meetings, it was a Google Doc, people worked in small subcommittees and really researched other policies, came back, added feedback, we talked about it, and we started adding things in, and then once people were finished, then I took it with my team, we wordsmithed it, added a few more things, brought it back to us, said, what do you think about this? We even gave it out to teachers, and the teacher shared it with her students, and they got feedback from students, and we just kept incorporating it until we brought it to you guys, right? So it's kind of like, that's how we developed the policy. Now we've got these regulations, which we haven't brought to the table yet because of everything that's happening, but it's gotta be this reiterative process where it's not just these 2 people in a room with the door shut creating this document, but there's gotta be a way to get some input from folks. So
Yeah.
I think what this is saying is that for whatever policy that we are creating, we will have regulations. And at least to include those 3 things, but there might be other things that we're missing that you might wanna add. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me, and I think, the only piece that I think try to clarify right now is that, I do believe that the community, in whatever faction, whether that be internal to PPSD, you know what I mean? Or if it's like a parent group that's outside of PPSD, or anyone who is affected by PPSD, I do believe should be able to pitch policy. I think there should be a process to do that, so that way you're not just getting like stuff that is not vetted, you know what I mean, or like well-researched, or like, I do think there should be a process that could very much follow a template that's similar to this, where it's like, have you done your research? Do you have like someone from the board who's sponsoring this? Like, what are, like, but I do think that's where the regulation comes in, and that's not something that we have to figure out here.
Right.
But I do think what I would feel comfortable like committing to having that happen, because I don't feel comfortable with the idea that only board and only the superintendent, I think that's what it reads, unless I'm misremembering, like, can propose policy, because while we as board members do represent the community, we don't represent the entire community, we could never. And I think just like as accountable gatekeepers, we have to like admit that out loud, that like as much, I'm a well-intentioned person who thinks I'm pretty rooted, but like that's what I think. Like, I don't know what everybody wants or what, like there's people in the community who have way more info than I do that have been impacted more. And so I just think like policy is the place where equity like lives or it dies, right? And so we have to like do what we can to like remove the barriers for folks to have a real like legitimate, in some sense, legal say over what happens, and not just use their voices, which is very powerful, but like having your voice on paper that's like in policy is different. You know what I mean? So
Isn't it, so these meetings are open to the public, right?
Yes.
Could someone who is attending this meeting, is there a place for them to say, I've been thinking about X, Y, and Z? Is there a policy for this? And if not, I really think we should have one. And then, is there a way for them to, I don't know, maybe create some kind of a document or something they could connect with online where they, like you said, pitch it right there. I really think there needs to be this kind of a policy. What is your evidence and reason for that? And then people look at it and say, because there might be things out there that it may be, hey, we do have a policy for this.
Right.
Here's where you go. Take a look at it. What are your thoughts? And maybe they could, well, I don't think it's clear enough. It doesn't really make sense to me. Like, is there an opportunity? Because I hear what you're saying.
So
Yeah.
my understanding of how that might work right now and how I've seen it work sort of indirectly is that a person would come to the full school board for public comment and submit public comment or raise a concern in that way to say that I don't feel like this issue is being addressed, or you have this policy and I don't believe you're following it, or I don't think this procedure is up to date with actual practices in the school where I teach, or the school where my child attends, or the school that I attend, if it's a student. I don't think that the structure to date of policy committee meetings tend to naturally include public comment. So that is a suggestion that we could make to future policy committees. But I think that by having the full openness of public comment within the full board, because I think that's kind of how we've seen before with resolutions, and sort of another angle to sort of get at that. And then for policy committee to consider, do we have policies already that exist on that, or maybe we don't, and then invite those folks to attend here. That's not to say that we couldn't change the structure, but right now, when I look at our agenda, which is similar to agendas from my predecessors, it's not designed that way.
Right.
And I'm not sure I haven't thought through until this question right now of what that might look like. I think common practice of late is that these are definitely public meetings. They're open for observation. And that public comment or comment on the agenda items has been at the discretion of the chair or the person running the meeting. And I would hope that all future policy chairs would choose to engage the public and attendees, but it still doesn't land the same way. And if I'm a member of the public choosing how to spend my time and engage, and I looked at this agenda, I might not see public comment there, so I might not choose to attend and use this avenue right now.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's something so heard. I totally hear you. I don't think it has been historically designed that way. And I think, what I think I want to see is us to push past to redesign something that is more inclusive. And I think what Dr. Onier is outlining, that's kind of what I see is this idea of not only are folks pitching any old idea, but that there's an education process of how policy is designed. I think it could be an incredible learning opportunity for somebody who does have a legitimate concern. But then to also have, and maybe it's us on the committee or whoever work with them, oh, you have this concern about, I don't know, after school sports or something like that. And that's a great idea. And there's all these pieces to move it forward. You got to get buy-in from folks. There's research. There's these different components of this. You actually having to come and make a pitch and convince people, right? And so no, not just any old thing will get through, because even good ideas don't move forward if you haven't done that buy-in work. You know what I mean? That education process. So I do look at it as a way to build capacity in our communities to help folks learn how to organize new policy. And it would just be really cool to see us invest in that in the future. Again, not that this policy, we wouldn't, to my understanding, outline that regulation in this, right? That would be a separate process. It would take some time to think about how to do it,
I think the two of you might have half the solution right here, where this policy has already been passed by the policy committee. We brought it back. Martha could speak to this more than I could, but I think in the past, the school board did specific meetings that were workshops, where you could workshop policy. And so that it might be just getting the second bite at policy committee between the first and second read, and just be explicit about this is your chance to come give more feedback. Because now you've had touch point one introduced, first passage, which spoke about in the committee chair's report, then you can pull it back in for more public comment, and, you can leverage social media or whatever to advertise it. A lot of times, people just aren't interested until after the fact for whatever reason. But we can definitely make good faith efforts on that. But that's my take on it. So you're kind of already starting to lay the template for the next group of board members, or hopefully the two of you.
I'm gonna suggest two things, to maybe wrap up this discussion, because I know that we are tight on time this evening. One thing I would suggest is, between now and the final read at our school board meeting next week, and by the way, that full school board meeting is next Wednesday, December 11th at 6 p.m. here at 797 Westminster Street on the third floor. Members of the public are welcome to attend without signing up ahead of time. If you're interested in public comment for that meeting, you can submit written comments to boardservices@ppsd.org, preferably, before the second half of the day on the day of the meeting, and those comments will get to board members. If you'd like to speak in person, you need to email that address to sign up ahead of time by 4 p.m. 4 p.m. And you will be put on the list and taken in order to provide up to 3 minutes of spoken comment during our meeting. And everyone is most welcome to do that at any of our board meetings. Before we do that, I would encourage us to review the policy adoption process section that is right above that communication section here, and see if maybe some of the items we just discussed around the back and forth, around additional discussion between first and second read, et cetera, or if there's anything specific language we'd like to see in there that might help articulate our desire for this policy and regulation. And then a second suggestion I would make is to echo maybe we just spent a bit of time in this meeting wordsmithing the communicate the policy section, particularly the second paragraph now there, that talks about venues for collaborative engagement. I might suggest just echoing that, copying that whole sentence there and adding it into that guidelines and implementation strategies section under number 3.
Wait, I'm sorry, which sentence?
So in the communicate the policy section,
Yes.
the last final sentence that we worked on a lot, that venues for collaborative engagement section.
Right.
So I'm suggesting to copy that, leave it there, but also copy that language
Got it.
and reiterate it again in the guidelines and implementation strategies section.
I'm gonna plop it down there and I'll clean it up after.
Yeah, and so that way we're being a little more explicit in that, right, when we say the regulations should address each of the following, how external and community stakeholder feedback will be incorporated into the policy writing and review process. If we echo that language there, I think that also gives us clarity that we're not just engaging with folks when we're making the policy, which is more about our intent, but we're actually saying that when we get to the regulations of a policy and the nitty gritty of what does that look like on the ground for students, for teachers, for families, for community members, that there is still that collaborative engagement process. What do you think about that, Ms. Newman?
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Are there any other sections that you feel need some more attention before we bring this back to the full board next week?
That was my main piece of feedback. I think everything else, makes sense to me, and yeah, this was really the part that I wanted to make sure we talked through.
I've been so appreciative to work with you on this committee. I know this is our last For those of you who may not know, the school board is undergoing some changes in the coming months, and this is my last official meeting as your school board policy chair. And it's been an honor to work with Ms. Newman and also Vice President Escobar, who could not be here tonight. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I hope that I have the opportunity to keep learning, either as a member of the board and a member of the policy committee, or just as a community member and Providence parent. I know we have a few guests in the community, and so in honoring our intent here, we have somewhat limited time, which is my fault this evening. I have a deadline, but I'd like to invite, is there anyone else who is here this evening who wanted to make a comment to us before this policy committee? We're so grateful to everyone that could be here tonight and join us and engage in this way. If there are no further comments from our district friends or from committee members, yes, Mr. Scott.
It's been an honor to work with both of you this past year, and we've really gotten a lot done. If you think about, we started to move policies and really get some structure in place to support it, and a lot of that came with the structure this board provided this committee.
I wanted to add too that I'm not gonna say goodbye. I refuse to say that, but I wanna say that it's really been a pleasure working with both of you. So much has happened, that doesn't make the news, doesn't make the papers, doesn't make it on Twitter. Any great stuff that we've done in the last couple of years. So your leadership has been phenomenal. Your input, Angel, I always am excited about, your level of thinking and input and thoughtfulness around some of the ideas you come up with. I'm really hoping that we get to continue to work together in some capacity. You guys are awesome. Just had to say that.
Thank you so much. Like, this is been an honor of a lifetime, and to echo what Melissa said, just whatever pans out with the board in the future, which I know will be really great stuff. You got some really great people coming aboard, like my commitment to PPSD, and I know yours as well is their title, no title, right? So we're rocking with y'all in this district and doing amazing stuff. So thank you.
I love that. And on that note, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I second that motion. All in favor? Aye. Our meeting is adjourned at 5:21 p.m. Thank you.
We're the
Space for my
hardest-
baby too. I didn't get him out right at that point. He was gonna start plugging.
No, so well behaved.
I know, he's fine.
He's like, it's so quiet. I'm about to turn up. I was like,